Whether you like it or hate it, you have to admit that Newsies has a big following. Hardcore fans of the movie, and even some folks who just simply paid close attention while watching it, know that it was based on actual events. Some who have done the research on the topic would know that it was a newsie named Kid Blink who led the strike, whereas in the movie, he is relegated to a mere sidekick among several others. Jack Kelly was actually based on a real-life person named Jack Sullivan. This is a fact. Go look it up. Not much is known about him, and here is why. You'll notice in the scene where Jack visits the Jacobs family, it is raining outside, yet when Jack leaves, it's clear out. That is only how Jack saw it during his hallucinations. What really happened was, in spite of the worries of David and his family, Jack decided to head back to the lodging house in the rain. However, it was unusually cold for summer that night, and it would soon lead to his demise. That night, Jack contracted severe pneumonia from the freezing rain. The next morning, Jack was so sick, he couldn't go to work that day. This was when his mind started playing tricks on him. The next scene featuring the Newsies. Kid Blink is the first of them to notice that the price they are to pay for their newspapers has risen, and tells everybody. In the film, after a minute or so of brainstorming, Jack decides they should go on strike, taking inspiration from the trolley strike happening at the same time. In reality, Kid Blink is the one to do so, after David brings said strike up while recalling the evening he spent looking after the bedridden Jack. From this moment on, everything Jack does is actually the actions Kid Blink takes during the events of the Newsies strike, with a little bit of his own fantasies sprinkled in. The night the strike began, Jack slipped into a coma. Klopman took care of him as his friends all took turns recounting what happened each day. That is where he imagined himself in their place, fancying himself as still the acting leader of the boys. During these dreams and hallucinations, they were occasionally interrupted by memories of an old childhood crush of his that once lived nearby, but died from scarlet fever. Jack barely knew much about her, so she lacks personality in these appearances in which she plays the role of David's sister, Sarah. In reality, David and Les are the only children in the Jacobs family. What looked like Sarah was actually a visiting cousin. Additionally, during the story these dreams lay out, an old family friend makes an appearance and takes on an active role as a news reporter named Brian Denton. David's intellectual first impression reminded Jack a lot of the man Denton is based on. So in these dreams, David thinks very highly of him. Sadly, the man had died at the hands of an embittered war veteran a few years prior, so later on, he partially leaves the story as he is reassigned as an ace war correspondent. As Jack's illness progressed, his hallucinations started to change. During his childhood, he once had a nightmare about a jail for children run by a corrupt man who killed his family and arrested him for trying to escape his wrath. Years later, in this new hallucination, the jail and the corrupt warden return with a vengeance. Snyder, as he is named in this story, is enlisted by the newspaper company to help destroy the strike and commands an army of policemen. The day he meets David, and before he contracts his illness, Jack has a mild sudden flashback of the original nightmare. That explains why it returns in his dream, almost immediately. For some reason, in the original nightmare, Jack is called Francis Sullivan, who was, in reality, the name of a next-door neighbor Jack had heard the name of countless times but never met. Here, when Jack is brought to court, Snyder says that Jack's real name is, indeed, Francis Sullivan. Meanwhile, in the living world, Jack is struggling to hold on as his friends continue to recount the events they are experiencing. A doctor was called in, who broke the devastating news. He may not live much longer, and probably won't wake up from his coma. Later on, David and his siblings are assaulted by a pair of resident thugs of the newspaper company. In reality, David has a mild scare in which he thinks he may have caught pneumonia too, after working alongside Kid Blink non-stop during the strike to the point that he barely sleeps anymore. Eventually, Jack's illness finally takes its toll. Once the strike is settled, he jumps into a carriage with Teddy Roosevelt and heads off to Santa Fe, symbolizing that he had finally passed away in the living world. In the dream, he comes back, realizing he has a family of friends there. In reality, this is merely symbolism too, as this represented the individual passings of his friends as the years went on.